Welcome back, friends, to the Juicebox Podcast. Stephanie's had type 1 diabetes for 26 years. She's 46 now, and she advocates for herself along the way. Today, Stephanie uses the Mobi pump, and we're going to talk a great deal about it. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. Drink ag1.com/juicebox. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. Don't forget, if you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, visit t1dexchange.org/juicebox right now and complete that survey. It will take you 10 minutes to complete the survey, and that effort alone will help to move type 1 diabetes research forward. It will cost you nothing to help. Guys, the end of the year is coming close, and I just want to thank you for another record-breaking season of the Juicebox Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, for sharing, and for supporting the things that I'm doing here with the Juicebox Podcast and on Facebook. I'm having an on-body vibe alert. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365, the only one-year wear CGM. That's one insertion and one CGM a year. One CGM, 1 year. Not every 10 or 14 days. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. US Med is where my daughter gets her diabetes supplies from. And you could too. Use the link or number to get your free benefit check and get started today with US Med. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox.
I'm Stephanie Reiner, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 20 years old, which was July 5th, 1998.
2008, 18, and then almost 26 years?
Mm-hmm.
Are you 46?
Yep, I'll be 47 the end of the year.
Look at me. So what happened? Fireworks scare you? Gave you diabetes?
Right? No, I went to Wales on spring break in college that year, and everyone on the trip got sick with some sort of respiratory flu type thing, and no one was diagnosed with anything. And it just lingered. I graduated college early at 20 and was excited. I booked a international tour to be a vocal soloist and the dance captain. And then that was for the fall. And then for the next spring, I was supposed to tour the US singing and acting. And so I just needed to fill the summer. So I went to work at a summer camp in a very small town in Indiana, which I'm from Florida. So I knew nothing of Indiana. That week I started getting sick, but that week they made us work in the kitchen, and I discovered it was grade D government donated meat. So I was like, this might be why I'm sick. And a friend from Florida had also gone, and he was getting sick too. But then by that Friday, I slept for 20 hours straight, got up, went to dinner with them, went back to bed. And then 4th of July, went to a party at someone else's house. Then we went to a concert. As I was going to the concert, I hit my head getting into the car. So I had a massive headache. I remember being really thirsty. So I got an icy because none of the drinks sounded good to me. So lots of sugar. And then I slept through the entire outdoor rock concert. So I slept through the 4th of July. And then when I woke up on the 5th, I could barely walk and was sick. And the previous day's dinner came up the same way, smelling the same way. So my digestive system apparently had already shut down. I was driven to an acute care place where they wouldn't give, I was just like, can I please have water or ice? And they were like, we don't have ice. And then me with a swollen tongue who can barely talk proceeded to read them the riot act about, as an acute care clinic, they're required to have ice because of the nature of the injuries they deal with. Because I had worked at acute care clinic a previous summer.
That's where you went.
Yeah. And I'm like, look, if I can't have ice, I can't have ice, but don't tell me you don't have ice. And all of that's with a swollen tongue. So I'm sure it was very easily understood.
By the way, had we cooked your tongue, it maybe smoked it for a couple of hours at 225 degrees, it would have been better than that meat you were eating in the cafeteria.
There you go. Yeah. It was bad. That was about it. They were like, you can have something after you see the doctor. So they gave me water, which you should never give to someone who's that dehydrated, that their tongue is swollen. So like what popsicles I had taken down came right back up. And then they had me get on the phone with my parents who were in Florida. And I'm just so lethargic and my tongue is swollen that I'm like, I don't even want to talk to them. I'm like, whatever, I just need to sleep. You guys talk to the doctor. So they decide that I should go to the ER. And I'm still like, if you just let me sleep, I'll be fine. Until we got to the ER and there's a nurse waiting outside with a wheelchair. They take me back into a room. There's 6 nurses and a doctor waiting on me. And they immediately start to work. And I'm like, I'm going to die. They don't care if I have insurance or if I can pay because all these people are waiting, and they immediately started working. And that's when I knew it was serious. I had a really bad headache, and my heartbeat was elevated. What I know now is classic DKA symptoms. But as someone who's danced my whole life, and I played a couple varsity sports and intramurals in college, they were telling me that I had too good of muscle tone to be a type 1 diabetic.
And what?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. What type of...
I mean, you've had diabetes for a long time now. Do you see any correlation between that?
No, not at all.
But listen, I think it's such a... You're not going to say a more damning thing in this entire conversation. Maybe you will. Then I knew I was sick when they didn't ask me if I could pay for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when it got serious. So they did a spinal tap, and they did a CAT scan, because they knew my blood sugar was elevated, but they were looking for other causes. And they couldn't find another cause. So after several hours in the ER, they moved me up to an ICU, and they decided that I'm so dehydrated that they have to do a central line. But they've never done that on anyone who was conscious. So they are a little nervous, and they keep asking me questions like, what's today's date and who's the president? Why you have a Florida driver's license? Why are you in Indiana? So like my medical records have this whole paragraph about how I just graduated from UF with a degree in psychology and blah, 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 blah. And I was supposed to go on tour, and I'm in town working at this camp and all this type of stuff. And then it's like, a patient is amazingly coherent. According to body chemistry, she should be unconscious. So they made...
Hey, who was the president?
In 98? I don't remember, to be honest.
I'm testing your recollection of the moment, not of the president. That's all.
Yeah. I haven't read my medical records in decades, but then they want me to sign a release, basically, that, if they kill me doing a central line, it's not my fault. But I'm so out of it and exhausted that I'm like signing, instead of using my hand, I'm like using my shoulder to move my arm because I don't have it in my muscles. And then I look at my signature and it looks nothing like my signature. So I started laughing, and they all get relieved, and they look at me and they're like, what's so funny? And they're like talking to me like I'm 5 years old, and they're waiting for me to be like, there's purple elephants dancing on your head, because it means I'm about to pass out. And instead I'm like, well, that doesn't look anything like my signature. So if you kill me, I don't know that would stand up in a court of law.
They're just like, if this girl would just pass out, we could give her this line. Yeah,
they did not appreciate that. So then they're like, okay, you have to take a deep breath and bear down and don't breathe again, because we're going to do a central line where we go through the muscles of your chest straight into your heart. If you move, you can create an air bubble that would go directly into your heart and kill you immediately.
Wait, I could. I feel like you could. I don't want to sign that. Give me that back.
Right? Right. So that's what I did. They just they did a topical numbing, and then you feel everything else. And you just take a deep breath and hold. They got the central line in, and then this was a teaching hospital, and this poor resident, I don't know what he was, intern, whatever, comes up, and the doctor had sent him to get me a popsicle because that's all I had been asking for the whole time I was there. And he comes back and he's like, she can't have a popsicle. We don't have any sugar-free popsicles in the whole hospital. And he names all the floors he's been to. And the doctor...
I've been on the first floor. I've been on the third floor. I was on the 5th floor.
Exactly. And the doctor just looked at him and read him the riot act, like up one side and down the other. He's like, I don't care if it has sugar or it doesn't have sugar. Do you see what we just did to her? We're going to put her on an insulin drip anyway. Get her a popsicle. I don't care what type it is. So then I wound up in ICU, and by this time, the people who worked at the camp and my friends and all the other counselors were all like waiting outside. So they let 3 of them come in. At that point, it was already after visiting hours, but they let them come in and they're all just like staring at me. And when all this happened, I didn't know at the time, but my friend from Florida had gone to buy me popsicles and took it back to the camp. And as he gets to the camp, the guy who leads the camp was leaving and was like, "Why are you here? Stephanie's in the hospital." So they turn around and come back to the hospital. He walks in the ER as the doctor comes out and goes, "Look,
if you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen." My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense 365. Here's what you're getting. Long-lasting CGM. 1 year you're wearing this thing. You don't have to change it. There's 1 warm-up and 1 insertion a year. So there's not going to be any more wasted sensors. This tiny sensor is designed to rest comfortably under your skin for a full year. The app is designed to work with both Android and Apple phones and Apple Watch. I think you really need to see it for yourself. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. The Eversense 365 is so much different, so much more unique than the other CGMs that you're accustomed to seeing or wearing. I really think you should take some time to go to the link and see what it's all about. I'm going to tell you one more time. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. 1 insertion a year. Remarkable accuracy. No irritation from adhesives. No falling off. No getting knocked off. It's not often in life that you get a pleasant surprise, but I have one for you today. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com.
We don't know if she's going to make it. If there's anybody you should call, you should go ahead and call them now."
Your friend who's on a popsicle run was told you weren't going to make it, maybe?
Yeah. When he walked into the ER, that's what the doctor told them. And there's like, you should start calling people.
Oh my
So he's
God.
the only one who actually like knows me.
Stephanie, contextualize this again. You're in what state and where is your family?
My family's in Florida.
And this is
And
happening?
I am Indiana.
Indiana. Okay.
And this guy who he and I sang in a touring ensemble together and stuff like that, he was working. We happened to choose the same summer camp, which literally is what saved my life, that we chose the same summer camp. And so, because he's the one who found me that next morning when I couldn't move. He had gone to get popsicles, was sent back to the hospital. He walks in to the ER gathering with the other people from camp when the doctor comes out and says, "We don't know if she's going to make it or not. You should start calling people." So he starts calling all of our friends in Gainesville. He does not have my parents' number, so he does not call them. And then one of the girls who was in a touring ensemble with us calls my parents, and she's hysterical. And she's like, "I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" And my parents are like, they have no idea why she's so upset, because they talked to the doctor at the acute care clinic who made it sound like it wasn't any big deal and I would be fine.
Yeah.
Then they get a call a little while later from the ER doc who says, "Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fatal. We don't know if she's a 9 or a 10. You need to get here tonight." So they immediately tried to book flights. There was a flight out of Jacksonville through Atlanta, but it wouldn't get to, they would miss a connection in Atlanta and they wouldn't make it to Indiana. There was a flight out of Orlando that they could take, but summer of 98 was very dry in Florida, and we had massive wildfires that the smoke had shut down I-95. So they couldn't get to Orlando either. So they drove the 14 hours across country, not knowing if I was going to be alive or dead. And that was like 98 when people didn't really have cell phones and stuff like that.
Yeah, and cars still sucked.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they got there the next morning and I was conscious and, could talk a little bit, but I was just very weak. And so I was in ICU for a couple of days, in a regular room for a couple of days, and then they dismissed us. The diabetes training was awful. I had some lady who was much older than my grandmother talking to me about, doing a syringe in an orange because it feels the same. And then she wanted me to poke her and give her a saline shot before I gave myself a saline shot. And I'm like, yeah, no, I will give it to myself.
They hired some old lady who's a masochist. They're like,
it was awful.
She's like, give me a shot. Do it, please.
I gave the orange a couple shots, but I'm not going to give you a shot, lady. And my skin feels very different than your skin,
Because of collagen.
Yeah. So it won't feel the same. And I definitely don't want to leave a massive bruise on some random lady. So because I'd been pushing through an orange, then my dad, once he found out I was going to be alive.
Your dad was like, I wasted this trip. I took a day off from work.
He flew back to Florida because my sister's 3.5 years younger than me. And so she was in high school at the time.
Oh, okay.
And so she was staying with my grandmother. So my dad flew back and then mom had to drive me back. And so she was begging them to discharge us from the hospital early in the morning because we had a really long drive. And of course we were discharged, in the early afternoon instead. And I had to lay down the entire trip home because my eyes were rehydrating. So everything was going in and out of focus and was blurry and it was awful. So I couldn't help her drive. And she's looking at a 14-hour drive. I had to go back to school for insurance purposes because this is before insurance reform. So I went back to school, just went to community college so that the summer was a quote unquote summer off and would still be covered by insurance versus diabetes forever being pre-existing, never covered.
Oh, yeah. You had to keep yourself insured consistently so that you didn't have to go look for insurance again as a type 1.
Yep. So then I had to bail on the international tour that I had booked and the national tour because they would not allow type 1 diabetics on the tour at the time.
Music were you singing?
It's like a Broadway style for the international tour. I was going to tour US, Canada, Great Britain, and Europe as their dance captain and a vocal soloist. Mm-hmm. They had never had anyone do that. So they were actually rewriting the roles and the entrances and exits to make it work for me. And then I had to call and be like, thanks for rewriting it, but I have type 1 diabetes now and I have to go back to school.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Any other diabetes in your family or other autoimmune?
My dad's side has type 2. Nothing with type 1. I had never even met a type 1. And actually, I did not meet another type 1 for a couple years after being diagnosed. Mm-hmm. I didn't know of any. On my mom's side, my mom did have low thyroid whenever she was pregnant with me. And because of my relationship with an endo later, she wound up on thyroid meds. There's not really any autoimmune there. What you always ask is bipolar. I do have a relative who has bipolar, but otherwise, nothing.
No other autoimmune stuff. Mm-mm. Yeah. Also, we should be clarifying for people who don't listen, like bipolar is not autoimmune, but it is Correct. Very inflammation related, which is why I always ask about stuff. Plus, I ask because so many people come on here
anecdotally,
who have a bipolar relative, and I'm just at this point now, I'm like, anybody? I'm so stunned every time someone's like, well, my uncle. I'm like, geez,
yeah,
crazy. Speaking of crazy, Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors. William Jefferson Clinton was the president in 98. Actually, this happened to you pretty much in the middle of the Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah.
Yes, that whole scandal. That's crazy. He kept saying popsicles, and I was like, I don't know. I want to call your episode Popsicles. My gosh. So you've had, I do want to go back a little bit. So you had to go back to school, but you went locally, it sounds like.
I went back to school in Gainesville, where UF is, because I had been involved in the community there. And there was a dance studio I was teaching at and stuff like that. Okay. So I went back to community college there, and I basically just took dance and drawing and psychology classes.
Mm-hmm. Do you still do those things?
Yeah, I'm a choreographer, and I dance and sing and act professionally occasionally.
Occasionally?
Well, what that means is I have professional contracts that I do, and it's just for one show. And then I don't necessarily pick up another contract to perform for a while. It has to be something I really want to do to disrupt my entire life.
I see.
For it, because it's 8 shows a week.
It's just such a fun statement, professionally, occasionally.
Yeah, occasionally. I do I'm paid to be a choreographer, and depending on the year, I can choreograph anywhere from 2 to 6 productions.
Okay.
And then since insurance reform happened, I no longer have to work corporate and then quit and go on COBRA for a year and a half before going back to corporate to be on a group insurance plan. Since that reform, I tutor math and chemistry middle school through college.
Oh, awesome. That's excellent.
Yeah. So it allows me a lot of flexibility.
Yeah. Are you married? Do you have kids?
I just got engaged a week and a half ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, no kids.
Yeah. Well, look at you being an adult. Are you still in contact with the kid that found you?
Not really. I mean, we are Facebook friends. It's not someone that I talk to regularly.
You don't get a message every once in a while, like, remember that time I saved your life?
Yeah, no, it's more like every time July 5th comes around, someone from that camp will talk about, how their life was forever changed, not knowing if I was going to live or die type of post happens. And then we all get tagged in it. And,
yeah. Remember the day Stephanie just disappeared?
Remember the day that Stephanie went in the hospital and then she wasn't at camp for the next month. And so we didn't have someone to teach drama or to sing.
Oh, no kidding. Everything changed for this. So everything really, changed for you a lot more, but.
Yes.
Okay. So throughout this time, it's a long time you've had diabetes. I don't know. I think I want to know about the shift between technology. I'd like to know what you've had to do to keep yourself healthy. What are some of the rear view mirror things that you can look back on and say, these are the things I wish people knew about?
Yeah. When I was diagnosed, then they proceeded to give me, an exchange diet type of thing where I had to get up at 8:00 and I had to take this mix of regular and NPH insulin. And I had to eat this many grams of carb, this many grams of protein, this much fat, this much fruit, and blah, 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 and on and on. And then at a certain time, I had to eat lunch because that's when the insulin was going to hit, ready or not. Mm-hmm. And there were certain things I had to eat. Then I had a choice around 3:00 in the afternoon. I could do a snack and eat dinner later, or I could plan to eat dinner earlier. And that would be a shift in my dose according to what I chose. It was not convenient that shift happened right before a jazz class. So I'm shoving peanut butter crackers in my mouth to be able to go dance. And then I was required to, eat a yogurt or something like that before I went to sleep every night. As a 20-year-old, I would have to get up at 8:00 every day, regardless as to whether it was the weekend or not, because of my insulin. It was difficult dating because it's hey, we need to go eat at this specific time. And these are the things that I need to eat, which, by the way, doesn't line up with any single menu item. So it's I'll take this entree, and then I also need this side with this and this. And so I tried to follow it pretty exacting, but it was the most frustrating thing. And I had no hunger signals anymore unless I was going low really fast and would shake.
Is that because you were eating so frequently, you think? Or
hunger signals?
Yeah.
I have no idea. It got to where they'd be well, what are you hungry for? And I'm that's just it. I'm not hungry. I'm eating because I'm required to eat. I no longer craved a pizza or a burger or something like that from time to time.
Has that gone away or changed?
No.
Arden talks about that.
Yeah, no, not at all. So it's the type of thing where it might be once every 3 or 4 months and I'm oh, I just really want a burger. Mm-hmm. And if I've already planned to go out with friends and they're getting something else, I'm that's great. You can get whatever you want, but I'm going to go to this place and I'm going to get a burger and then I'll meet you. Cause I try to reinforce the hunger signals that I have.
Yeah.
But
you try to pay your body back for telling you something.
I'm thank you for actually communicating. Let's continue this.
Here is the cheeseburger you asked for. Grade A.
Exactly.
Grade A, by the way.
That's right. No more government donated junk.
By the way, I have to tell you, I looked into it. The D rating is not how they grade beef, but still, I like the visual. So,
Yeah, it was bad.
wait a minute.
So I'm sorry.
No. Hold on. I have a question. So you were like, as a young person, following this super strict schedule, and you were actually following it, right?
Yeah.
So to the detriment of what it sounds like is your personal life and perhaps some of your happiness, but you followed it. Did it pay you back? Were you getting the health results that you wanted?
I didn't even know like what the health results goals were. Like when I came back to JAX from Indy, I met with an endo and it was not good. Like the first thing she said is like, she ranted to me about how I could never get pregnant until I had had a normal A1C for at least 9 months. And she literally meant a normal as in not diabetic A1C, which
like in the 4s?
Yeah, like in the 4s to low fives, which I'll let you know when I have that. And she just went off about it. And then she turned around and she's like, look, we want diabetics to exercise, but dance is a very unpredictable exercise. So we're going to need to figure out something else for you. And I just stopped her there and I go, okay, let's just start again. I said, I'm Stephanie. I have diabetes. Diabetes does not have me. I dance. So you're going to have to find a way to make it work. And because I bucked up and kind of talked back basically and was like, no, this is what I need. That's why I got the approval to go to school in Gainesville, because I had to have an endo sign off for me to be that far away. It's only an hour and a half away. She was like, as long as you come back every 3 months, then I'm fine with you going to Gainesville.
Wait, diabetes was impacting your ability to move around the country if you wanted to?
Yeah, within some of the insurance stuff. Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's all crazy.
Yeah.
You're old. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. I'm still here. Yeah. So, but then I didn't get really education about like what insulin does and that type of, I just knew you take this and that. So it was the type of thing where if I went to a party and I wanted ice cream, I didn't have an intelligent way to dose for that. Mm-hmm. And so I would just randomly dose. And all I had was regular and NPH. And I would just dose for ice cream and not know if it was going to work or not work. And really had no idea that I could kill myself with insulin.
I'm so stunned by that idea of that you didn't even know what your goals were.
No.
Did you ever watch that TV show Lost? You're old.
Yes.
You probably saw it.
Yes.
You remember they had to push the button?
Yeah, totally.
It feels like that.
Yes.
Yeah. It just like do this thing and you're like, okay, I'm 20, but I'll go to the early bird special at 4 p.m. and have dinner then and like not eat anything and only eat this and blah, blah, blah. But you didn't know. So you're doing this thing over and over and over again, but you don't know why. That seems very frustrating to me.
It was incredibly frustrating. Like all I knew was about type 2 diabetes and like all the complications that can happen because of type 2. And that's all that I knew. I mean, JDRF existed, but they did not do anything. There was no first diagnosis support or anything like that.
Where you were?
No. Yeah. And I think part of it also is because I was diagnosed in Indiana and then I moved back to Florida.
So you weren't grounded anywhere really either.
Right. Yeah.
I just talked to a guy in his 70s, like a 76-year-old guy, and he credits JDRF for really helping him because when they first started, it was the first time that you could get information that wasn't like at the library.
Right.
And he's like, that really changed my life. So it would have been nice to have some information as well for you. But I just think I'm going to go back to this for half a second, then I'm going to let it go. But I want everyone listening, I don't want to break the fourth wall in our conversation, but wonder about how many things, diabetes or not, you're doing every day and you have no idea why you're doing them. I just think it's a deep question to look at yourself and say, how many things am I just automatically doing that I maybe don't even need to be doing or could be doing differently or better, or maybe don't even know at all why it's happening. I think it's an important thing to examine once in a while. But
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you're out there with your ice cream just winging it. Does this go well mostly or?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. It went pretty well. Yeah, it was a frustration. And, I would get gigantic black bruises where I had nicked a vein or artery or whatever.
Yeah, you should have stuck the lady in the hospital. You would have learned.
Well, can't help it when you hit a blood vessel, which is more noticeable when you live in Florida and you go to the beach all the time and that type of a thing.
But you were injecting a lot, you're saying?
Yeah. Well, there was no pump option for me at that time. And then, so that was like a year, and I taught dance, and I went to community college, and then I got a job back in Jacksonville where I was a part-time administrator for an arts institution. And then I taught drama and dance there, so that it wound up being full-time between all the hours so that I qualified for their insurance. Mm-hmm. And that made me switch to Mayo in Jacksonville. And that endo told me, because I was asking about a pump, he told me not to even consider it, that the pumps were not good enough and diabetes would be cured in 5 years.
That was back when you were 20?
That was when I was 21. Yeah, that was in 99.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm testing my blood sugar tons. And, anytime that I'm dancing, I'm testing before I'm dancing. And then if I feel shaky during dancing, I would check it. But really, for the most part, like, I was probably coasting a little high and didn't know any better. Didn't know kind of what goals I should have pre and post exercise and that type of thing, because basically they just looked at my numbers like, yeah, you're doing fine. And by doing fine probably meant that I was like 6.8 to 7.2 on an A1C.
Yeah.
With no CGM and no pump.
Right. And back then, no idea if you're like bouncing up and down or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. The standard deviation doesn't exist into that. And then I moved to Dallas, Fort Worth. I danced part-time with a professional dance company. And then I was also working corporate. And my endo in Dallas was phenomenal. And they were involved in a ton of research. And so literally the day after that the 24-hour insulin and short-acting insulin became approved in the US, I had it.
When was that?
That was like in 2001-ish.
Okay, 2000? Only 3 years until the cure. So you were probably
right.
Did you actually live thinking that this will be over in 5 years?
No.
Okay.
Because, and that's more of a personality thing. It's like I can't, like, I'm not banking on anything right out there as, a constantly moving target.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have right now to set myself up for what I want to do. And so a lot of it was fighting against the current of, no, I still want to perform. I still want to dance. I still want to have that option, because everything that they wanted me to do from an endocrinologist appointment was, please just live the same life every day. And like, it was a Groundhog's Day was the solution, so that your life is completely predictable. And I'm like, that's great. That does not work for me. Personality wise, I like things that are spontaneous and changing and shifting. And I like that energy and interaction. And so I want to have that flexibility, besides the fact that, yes, I dance and do choreography. And sometimes if I'm teaching a class, I'm dancing the whole time. And sometimes if I'm teaching a class, I'm dancing very little and I'm just doing small corrections. And yes, that is more difficult to manage, but it's worth it for me, and I want to do it. And so that has been a big part of the fight throughout, is to have flexibility built in to my diabetes management. And so I had to, push against endos. Mm-hmm. That endo was great. Unfortunately, a year later, so I guess that was around 2000, because then 9/11 happened and the company I was with went through layoffs, and I went in the third wave of layoffs. So it's like, it was on my 1-year anniversary with the company. I had uprooted my whole life and moved to Dallas, Fort Worth, and I was there. And so I went on Cobra, which is very expensive, and I continued to do choreography and that type of thing and look for work. And in the meantime, I made a dance company, and we danced in Dallas, Fort Worth for a while. We toured that next summer. We toured Florida for 6 weeks, and we went and danced in Norway for 10 days. Mm-hmm. And then I went back and got a corporate job because Cobra was ending. And I did recruiting, and then I went into purchasing management. And with that insurance, it required a different endo who I had a string of some bad endos in Dallas, Fort Worth. One messed up some medication so bad that they took it out of my record because it could have killed me. And I don't even remember what it was anymore. Sorry for that little tidbit just to tease you with, and then be like, I don't even know what it was. So I changed doctors. I had found this great one, and he was phenomenal. And then he got stomach cancer, and he had to quit his practice. The lady who took over proceeded to berate me every time I went in and tell me how, I was killing myself and I was doing this and but there was no education that went with it. And trust me, I met with diabetes educators and they're like, you know what to eat and you know what this is, so you're doing fine. Mm-hmm. The lady, her way was to scare and intimidate people. And it was so bad that they had me go out the back door so that no one in the lobby would see my face. Because I had been so angry. I cry when I'm angry and my whole face was red. So they didn't charge me for that. They didn't want record of it.
Did they pushed you out into the alley?
Yeah, pushed me out the back door.
They're like, dance away, Steffi.
Yep. Okay. So, and then around, I don't know, it was like 2003, 2004, mm-hmm. I wound up in the hospital with DKA. I didn't know that I should look at my insulin closely and know that it's not cloudy, and that type of, it had been kept. It was a new vial, but the vial I got was cloudy and I didn't know any different. I took it into the hospital. So I went into DKA, but I was treating myself repeatedly and it wasn't coming down. So when I went in, unfortunately, this hospital typically deals with type 2s and I'm in the ICU and an internist comes in. He's, treating him, whatever. And then they go to give me a meal, but they give me insulin and then I eat and I go to bed, whatever. And then they check my levels before I go to bed for the night. The next morning they're checking it. And I realized that because my blood sugar's okay, they're not going to give me insulin for my meal, but they want me to eat breakfast. And I'm like, no, I can't eat breakfast without insulin. I knew that much. And they're like, no, you have to. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I can't. And so they're like, it's doctor's orders, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I'm not going to eat. And I was like, I'm not going to eat if you won't give me insulin. So then the doctor comes in. He's mad because I have threatened his authority. I don't know. I'm non-compliant, clearly. So I literally drew a picture for him. I'm like, okay, so I eat. Here's the simple carbs. They're in and out in an hour. Here's the complex carbs. They're in and out in 2 hours. Here's your fat and protein. They're hitting about 4 hours. They stay till about 6 and then they're tapering off. This is why you want a balanced meal so that you have balanced blood sugar. I was like, however, I don't release any insulin to combat this. This is why I need insulin. Da, 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 da. And he went off and he was angry and and so mind you, at the time I was primarily dancing. And so he goes off and tells me that the reason I'm in there is because I'm out partying and drinking every night. And he just went on this tirade about clearly, a young to mid 20-something-year-old woman, that's all she does, and she's not taking care of her body, which as a dancer, that doesn't quite work. I just looked at him and I said, you're fired. I said, I'll take another doctor.
So, but I'll have to tell you, it's incredibly common to hear from younger people that someone just takes the leap and goes, oh, you're struggling or whatever because you're out partying all the time. Were you out partying all the time?
No, I wasn't. I didn't even drink.
It's so funny. Nothing. It happens constantly. It almost is like, mm-hmm. It's how you kids are. Oh, great. Just lump me in with everybody. That's fantastic.
And that's what I told him. I was like, no, I'm a dancer. I cannot do that. And perform well. And he just continued. So I said, okay, you're fired. Mm. So then a little while later, another internist came in rather hesitantly, I was going to throw something at him. And clearly had been told I was non-compliant. He's like, well, why don't you tell me what the problem is? And so I showed him, I'm like, here's the graph I just showed this guy. And this is why I won't eat breakfast if you won't give me insulin, because the only normal blood sugar I will have during my hospital stay is in the morning. You're going to keep feeding me.
Did that help? Did the second person go, oh, okay, hold on, let's get you some insulin?
No, you know what he said? He's like, wow, you know this better than we do. We primarily teach type 2s. He goes, so why don't we do this? I'll get your body chemistry in order and you manage your blood sugar. I'll let you dose your own insulin. And then that's when we saw that it was cloudy. And he's like, we need to get you new insulin. I didn't know. Because I was like, it was a new vial that came from the pharmacy.
Right. But at least you found a reasonable person.
Absolutely. And so then he's like, okay, once I get your potassium leveled out, he's like, I'll write you a note for work that says that you need to be on bed rest for a week. And then that you do half days for the week after that. But he's like, we don't know how to treat type 1s. We treat type 2s primarily here.
I'd like to get a script for bed rest for a week. You think the guy that makes this podcast would let me go? I want to, I'd like a week off. That sounds awesome. So, okay. Yeah. So you found a reasonable person, you get your cloudy insulin fixed, etc. That good. Yep. That's awesome. These kind of things continue to happen through life with diabetes, or does it change as you Like, do you find yourself in the hospital over and over again as the years go by? No.
The only other time I was in the hospital was shortly after I went on the pump with a bent cannula.
Okay.
And that was the only time. And that was an easy fix.
Listen, it's an interesting look at what it was like back then. And I think because you fought back and had a tiny bit of understanding, and it's, understanding that it seems like you built on your own. It's not like anybody came along and gave it to you. Yeah. So I think it saves you because you weren't even in the late 80s. You were the late 90s, and still everything was janky as could be. I don't know that I don't know. I mean, the technology's better. The medications are better. I don't know if the on-the-ground understanding's any better, but you saved yourself. You really did. Because if you would have just listened to them, you'd be in a completely different health situation today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I wasn't the personality that advocates for myself, I would have been totally in a different place.
Yeah, you have no idea. And do you have any complications today?
No.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad for you. But I mean, it's literal. I know too many people who are like, hey, I did what they told me. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now let me tell you about what it feels like to get a needle in your eye 1,000 times.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So
then I moved to Indiana.
Yeah.
And that's where Eli Lilly is. And I had a phenomenal endo there. He asked me if I wanted to be on a pump, and I told him what the Mayo doctor had said like 10 years earlier. And he's like, no, he's like, we need to get you on a pump. And so he's the first and only endo who advocated strongly for me. And he fought with me against Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. And I was the first person that got approved for an insulin pump and CGM.
You didn't tell them I don't need a pump. They cured diabetes 5 years ago.
Right?
Yeah, I'm all good. Did you not hear? By the way,
unfortunately,
I don't know that we've ever truly cured anything.
Anything?
Yeah, we eradicate things, usually through vaccines. When you think about what it means to be cured, you're talking about there's something wrong with me, and then something else is introduced, and now that thing is not wrong anymore and doesn't come back.
Right.
I mean, I think there's certain kinds of cancers that they can completely get out of you. But I don't know what people think when they think cure. You know what I mean?
Right.
Let me ask you a question. If they could stick a packet of cells in you that your immune system couldn't get to, and therefore you didn't need anti-rejection meds, and your body just was like, boom, I don't know, they put in some new beta cells, you're making insulin, you're all good. Are you cured, or do you just not need man-made insulin anymore because there's a device in you?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're defining cured as the body being restored to how it originally functioned, that's not happening. If you're talking cured in that I'm not needing a synthetic insulin anymore, that's a different story.
Right. Yeah. And probably no one would turn their nose up at that, I don't think.
Correct.
Yeah. It's just the word is, I don't know. I think it's misunderstood, perhaps, to some degree, commingled with other ideas. If you could eradicate my daughter's type 1 diabetes, but, she still had the autoimmune issue that put her there. I mean, I think I'd take that as a pretty big win, but it's funny that a doctor said to you, don't worry, this will all just be gone soon.
Right. Yeah. It's like a magic eraser.
Don't worry. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So he fought with me with insurance, and I got Blue Cross Blue Shield to give me an insulin pump and a CGM. Before that, I was doing a minimum of 8 shots a day to give myself flexibility to be able to dance and rehearse, as well as work corporate and eat when I was hungry, not really hungry, but close to it, versus just eat on a schedule. So to give myself the most flexibility, and that's why he helped me get a pump. But the problem is I wound up being allergic to the CGM. It was Medtronic. I was allergic to their original CGM, the one that looks like sliced mushrooms. And they couldn't figure out why. And so I just basically dropped, 3,000 to 5,000 on a useless something. And then I had the pump. It was great. Unfortunately, once it got approved, he died, but endo, and I wound up with his partner who had no bedside manner. He's the one who told me that I would be in this horrible position until I learned to say no to people. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. I'm a purchasing manager. I negotiate multi-million-dollar deals with Exxon and Dow, and I have no issue speaking my mind and telling people no.
Wait, what did he think you weren't sticking up for?
He said that I wasn't prioritizing my health, but he didn't ask me what I did or what I didn't. It was his typical speech that he gives every single patient, I found out.
Oh.
he primarily worked with gestational diabetes, and then he had to take over his partner's patients until they could get somebody else in there. And I told him, I said, well, until you see the patient in front of you instead of the one in your head, I'm not getting anywhere.
You're telling me that basically he looks up and goes, diabetes, I'll give him this old chestnut, and then tells the story?
Yes.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was that guy. And then I moved back to the Northeast Florida area, which is where I'm from, and have been with the same endo pretty much for the last 10, 11 years. And really, a lot of it at the beginning was just like, I needed someone who would listen and who would validate and would dialogue with me and kind of get over the different trauma of the different people who would yell at me as endos. And I'm like, but you don't understand. That's not what this is. And that was great. Now, since insurance has been pushing back on different scripts and stuff, he would do things off label, but the last 3 to 4 years, not so much. And so I don't know how much I will stay with that endo, because you're doing better than 99% of patients anywhere. My A1s, I have switched over. Once my Medtronic was up for warranty, I switched over to Tandem. I was on the Freestyle for a while because my Medtronic, wouldn't cooperate with anything. So I just did a Freestyle Libre. And then just by adding the Freestyle Libre with the Medtronic pump, I was able to take my A1C from a 6.8 to 7.2, and then it dropped down to more the mid 6 range, 6.4 to 6.8. And then once that was up, I went to Tandem's pump, and then with the Dexcom and the basal IQ, and then to control IQ. And with that, then I was pretty much maintaining about a 6.2 without a lot of work.
Awesome.
But a lot of it is, I'm tweaking my settings. He's not. He confirms it. And like he only wants to see me like every 4 to 6 months because I'm doing it all. But I'm like, yeah, but I'm still a patient. I would like to have someone to dialogue this through with and to look at which ways can we tweak it better. I may be doing better than 99% of the people, but that doesn't mean that I'm doing the best that I can do, because I would love to have as close to normal A1C levels, provided that I'm not, doing the standard deviation game of dropping down into nothingness.
That one fascinates me too. Like, you're like, hey, I have a 6.8. I'd like to do better. And they go, a lot of people in this office have a 10. What does that have to do with me?
Exactly. That's what I told him. I was like, I said, I'm still paying you for a session to be my doctor. And that means that you're treating me where I am and taking me to the next place.
Yeah, you got to realize he feels like you're a win.
Yeah, exactly.
You're checked off the list. You're like, Stephanie, done. Don't need to do anything for her. Here's your scripts, honey. Get out of here. Yeah, no, that's awesome. What pump do you use modern day today?
Now I'm on the Mobi. I went on that at the beginning of March. My Tandem pump went out of warranty in August of 2023. And I really adamantly wanted the Mobi. I knew it was going to be coming out, so I refused to sign up for a new one. And they're like, no, you can change over for $1,000. I said, or I can stay with this and my insurance pays for it. So I'm going to wait you out. And they're like, well, what if your pump malfunctions? You won't get a warranty. I was like, then I'll switch over to prescription benefits and do Omnipod for a while. And maybe I'll come back to Tandem. Maybe I won't.
Just look at him. Is that just a salesperson or a doctor trying to shake you out of that 1,000?
Doctor. Oh, no, not doctor. It's Tandem. It's Tandem constantly calling me every month about my out of warranty. And I just was honest. I was like, look, I'm going to continue with my out of warranty pump. I'm not going to have my insurance lock me in to this brick. It's not a brick, but what felt like a brick, because when I'm going to perform on stage, where do I put that? It doesn't show in a costume if I'm dancing or other times with, if I'm doing more of a stage play, then where does it go in that so that it's not showing and everything? And so I was like, I don't want it. I want the Mobi.
Can I ask you, so you wanted a small footprint but you wanted to stick with their algorithm because you could have gone to Omnipod. But you like the Tandem algorithm.
I like the Tandem algorithm. It's also with Omnipod, it is prescription benefit, which is a lot more money for me.
Oh, your insurance doesn't cover it as well.
Yes, because my insurance, my durable medical is paid at 100%.
I see. Yeah. So, okay. Well, that even makes more sense. So it wasn't as much about like the algorithm as it was about the cost.
I knew the algorithm worked for me. So I was planning, and so I'm good with staying with that. I would have been fine with trying the Omnipod algorithm had it not been cost prohibitive comparatively.
I understand. Okay. So how long you've been wearing it since March? Can you tell me a little bit about it? I don't know. You might be the first person I've spoken to who's wearing it. What do you think?
I love it. I mean, it's the same algorithm is the reality. So there's not a big switch for me in that way. The new option is obviously it's literally half the size. It's slightly smaller than an AirPod case, carrying case. I personally like the clip that comes with it. Some people have trouble getting it in and out. I don't have that issue. I like that I can put it in the coin pocket of my jeans. I can hook it on my jeans. I can hook it at the center of my bra and it stays and it's out of the way and it's not visible because I don't have to ever touch the pump because everything is run on my phone. I can tell you that like the first month and a half that I had it, I felt like I had this irrational anxiety of I had to have my phone up under me and on and fully charged at all times. I had that little freak out type of a thing, but it's not there anymore. I did have some issues with bent cannulas or just poor absorption with the 5-inch tubing, because when you go to insert the 5-inch tubing, when you pull it back, it's much more stiff than any of the 23-inch tubings. So it's easier to dislodge it or have it slightly crooked so that when you go to apply it, it doesn't go in straight and you wind up with a bent cannula. So on my arm, I tried wearing it on my arm with the sleeve because great, I don't have to worry about where I put it in my clothes. Inserting it on your arm by yourself with a 5-inch that was really tight pulling back, I had a lot of bent cannulas. There's a massive learning curve for that as someone who been using the 23-inch for 5 years.
Okay.
There was a massive learning curve.
Because so with the Mobi, for people who maybe don't understand, like you can do it like on body, right? Like there's like an adhesive sleeve you could put on and then slide it in and then just use that short 5-inch cannula and then kind of keep everything, the infusion set and the pump right in the kind of the same spot on you, stuck to you, not having to clip it to your clothes. But the shortness of that tubing
is tubing, not cannula, 5-inch tubing.
Yeah, sorry. So the shortness of the tubing is like kind of created a learning curve where you had to like really figure out how to put that in straight without bending the cannula.
Yeah, well, and you're balancing because you have to balance the Mobi on your arm while you're trying to insert it on your arm all one-handed because clearly my elbow doesn't 360 up to hold it. Yeah.
So are you wearing it with the adhesive sleeve or do you prefer the longer tubing and just clip it to your clothing?
I use the 23-inch most of the time because it allows me to move the pump to wherever I want for whatever I wear that day. So like if I'm wearing a dress, then I can just pump it. I can hook it into my bra in the center, on the back, wherever I want, and it stays and I don't have to worry about it. If I'm wearing shorts or, jeans or whatever, I can hook it on the waistband of that or to the pocket of that. And it lets me change it around to, I want to put it in the back because, I'm wearing something that's more fitted. And so I'm going to hook it to the back of something. That allows me to have the option of whether it's seen or not seen and how accessible it is by doing the 23-inch. When it's summertime in Florida and there's a water park here in my neighborhood, I'm going to go to the water park, especially when I go with like my niece and nephew who are like 5 and 2.5. I'm going to be going down the water slides. I wear the sleeve and put the Mobi in that because it is water resistant up to 8 feet for up to 2 hours, which is the same water resistance as Omnipod. There's a lot of people in Mobi land who are like, it's not waterproof, so you shouldn't do it and this, that, the other. It's water resistant. I'm not swimming laps, so I'm not as worried about that. But I have also, in this process of being one of the first 5,000 in the US to get it, have talked with their tech support and I have done some troubleshooting questions with them on their training modules and other things like that. And so as a part of that, in talking with their tech people, the tech people are shocked that people are not just wearing it 24/7 in the shower, in the pool and that type of thing, that some people are still hesitant about that water resistance rating. And I just think that's the difference is if an Omnipod messes up, you just put on a new pod. If your Mobi water resistance messes up, you're waiting for a replacement. Yeah. And that's the difference.
Right. Yeah. Then that could scare people away. You said a couple moments ago about like you had a feeling that you needed to keep the phone like very close, but is the algorithm not on the phone?
The pump and my CGM talk to each other and they work regardless. The app on my phone is my visibility into what the pump is doing. Okay. And then it's also my place to go in and enter in carbs, shift into exercise mode and other things like that, which exercise mode, I have a whole different profile for, because just shifting into exercise modes with the same insulin correction factor does nothing, because it'll give you corrections and then you wind up plummeting. I also have a tendency I like the sleep mode for their algorithm and pretty much run sleep mode 24/7, because I've dialed in my basal and I've dialed in my carb ratio. So that way, if I know, if I go shopping, it doesn't matter if it's clothes or groceries or whatever, I drop like a rock. Okay. There is no adrenaline. There's no enjoyment for me. And I drop like a rock with that. So I know that. And so I make sure that I don't get a bolus, and I want to make sure that I run a little bit higher before heading into that. And if I was running the normal control IQ versus the sleep mode, it does auto boluses when it predicts you're going to go over like 170. So I tend to go for sleep mode, but just because I don't want to have to pay attention to the auto boluses before
I see.
doing life.
So if I took your phone and threw it out the window, you couldn't bolus, right? You couldn't see what was going on.
I cannot see. I did go ahead. There's one button on the Mobi, and you can use it to snooze alarms, which is really annoying that you can't actually clear alarms on it. Just snooze it. You have to clear it from the app. And that's one of the things I talked to them about their training module, because for the first 24 hours, I thought I was going to throw the Mobi off a bridge because it kept buzzing and I kept clearing it on the pump, but you actually have to you have to swipe left on the app to clear it.
Okay.
So that it won't snooze and go off again another 2 minutes. But I programmed it so that if I hold it down, I can microdose. And basically you can decide, like, every time I hold it down, that is equivalent to 0.1 units or 0.05 units or 0.25 units, whatever you want it to be. And you hold it down and you do that multiple times, and then it mimics it back to you to confirm what the dosage is, and then it'll give it to you. But that's you just giving the insulin versus actually entering in, like, hey, this is how many carbs I'm eating, and now I can see what my blood sugar is, and this is what the algorithm's predicting. So you're missing that point without the app.
Right. But the algorithm's still running.
Yes.
But it doesn't know that you had carbs if you had carbs.
Right.
So you can, like, test with a meter. Like, so if you left your house, forgot your phone, you could test with a meter if you had one, and then bolus for food based on if you had the button program to do something.
Right. Some people choose not to program that button. I don't know why you wouldn't, but I did that as a part of the setup.
Okay.
It's an option in your setup.
Well, maybe for kids, maybe people don't want to have them, like, being able to just be like, hey, insulin.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So you like it?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Like, the size makes the biggest difference in the world. And I know that it sounds minimal to a lot of people, but when it's literally half the size, and I go from everyone seeing it and crazy people asking me if I have a pager still, that type of thing, to where people don't even notice it, it's a big difference. And for me to be able to perform on stage without necessarily, like, I don't have any issue with my CGM being seen. I don't have any issue with my pump being seen. I talk to people about it all the time. When you're on stage and it's, something said in the 1800s, it might pull them out a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to hide it if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, Arden's been wearing an Omnipod since she was 4. And I still, like, get stuck on the idea of, like, how do you sleep with the tubing? Like, and I'm sure, obviously it's very doable because people do it constantly. It's interesting how, like, whatever you're accustomed to, that's
your normal.
Yeah. And the other stuff seems like crazy, Right.
Well, with the 5-inch tubing, I do generally wear it in a sleeve. I did play around with the 5-inch tubing on my stomach some. And, like, if I was going to go to the bathroom, I would just clip it to the bottom of my t-shirt, and then it would stay in place. You can also, the Mobi is so much lighter that if it dangles from it, it does not pull.
Oh, okay.
And it's not a deal. It's not heavy like the previous, like the Tandem X2. If that came unhooked and dropped, sometimes it could pull my sight off because the weight of it pulling and falling. But with the Mobi, that's never a problem.
Awesome. It holds 200 units. Is that in a cartridge, or do you have to fill something?
You fill it. You can actually see it on the side. This is better than the X2, and that is kind of an all-in-one thing, the way that they have you filling it. The downside is that it's very visible. So a lot of people are seeing all the bubbles that happen in every pump when the insulin warms up, and then they're worried about clearing bubbles, which is totally valid. But you had that same concern with the other pumps and you just didn't have
Couldn't
the
see
visibility into it. Yeah. So I make sure that when I wear it where the tubing points down so that the air bubbles are at the top of the cartridge so that the air bubbles are not getting pushed through my tubing.
Does that happen though? The air bubbles come through?
They can if you wear it the other direction because the air bubbles float to the top.
Oh.
And so then they can come out. But that's what happens in any other pump, that they just don't see the bubbles.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an Omnipod thing. So again, like that's a thing I've never had to deal with.
Yeah.
Like priming tubing and stuff like that. Like I don't know about that. Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you.
Absolutely.
What have we not talked about that you wanted to?
I think that's pretty much it. I mean, a lot of it, my journey has been insisting that the doctors would have to find a way to make it work. And then me doing the research to say, no, this is possible. Or me choosing, like, instead of just doing the 4 shots a day, I'm going to go to 8 shots a day so that I have that flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And me choosing flexibility over what they felt was safe predictability. But for me, that safe, predictable every day is the same, felt like a slow death. Like I like to have my days be different, and I like to be able to decide to go dance or go kayak or,
whatever,
do what I want when I want, as opposed to being locked in. And there are doctors who get that. And there are doctors who, when you push back, think you're being non-compliant.
Well, it's a space on their form. They know how to fill that out. She's not listening to me.
Right.
I told her that story that I tell everybody, and she didn't like it.
Yeah.
Have you experimented with different eating styles throughout the years?
Not really, to be honest. I am, like, ever since I was a child, I am meat driven. Like, what do you want to eat for dinner? If we go out, it's always, what meat do I want? And then the sides I don't really care about. That didn't really drive my choice ever. So that is what it is. That's the way I've always eaten. Since dosing insulin and all of that, I have tended to eat my vegetables first, and then my meats, and then my carbs come at the end. I just stumbled upon that. I know that does slow the absorption of that carbs and and it minimizes the spike.
Mm-hmm.
I did not do that purposely. It's something that's how I already ate, and it happened to be that it minimizes the spike.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. You tripped on that one.
Because I listened to your glucose goddess, and I was like, oh, I already do that. And that's just the way that I eat.
Yeah. Not on purpose, not because someone told you, just dumb luck.
Correct.
Isn't that great?
Yes. Yeah. I just felt it's nice when something actually works out on its own.
Every once in a while, I like to just get lucky, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's right.
I have one final question for you. Do you think that the age you were diagnosed at helped or hurt? Like, what did your parents do that thing where they were like, she's an adult, or were they still very involved?
Oh, yeah. My parents were very, they were terrified, and they were no help. Is really the bottom line. Well, it didn't help that there's a lady my mom knows who 2 of her 3 kids were type 1s, but they were young, and one was going through puberty, and literally the mom was sleeping in her bedroom trying to keep her alive. And so my mom was hearing all these horror stories. And then I'm in Texas, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get my own apartment. She's like, you can't live by yourself. And I'm like, no, I'm getting my own apartment. That's what I'm doing. I'm not changing everything. Now, don't get me wrong. I make sure my blood sugar's fine. I'm going to get my own apartment. And so I would come home, and they would make something, and then I'm digging through the trash for the boxes to have a clue about carb counting and that type of thing. And I've been back in Jacksonville and near my parents for 12 years. And it's really only in the last 4 years. So 4 years out of 26 that they are consistently recognizing that we should keep the carb counts out for Stephanie.
Oh, okay. They're starting to figure it out now?
Yeah.
That's not bad. It's coming along.
Yeah.
You never know. By the time they're 150, they might really have
it. Right? Yeah. No, but it was mine. I was the one who had diabetes. I was the one who had to deal with it. And I did. Now, it's also I feel like within my family dynamics, it's we don't really have to worry about Stephanie. She always lands on her feet. She finds a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. And so with diabetes, it was that. It's been interesting in dating. Some people, it's your diabetes. And so you manage it however you do. And you let me know if I need to do anything. And then other people want to know all about it. And some of them want to overstep. And that's been different for me because like my family has not typically been involved in my diabetes. So to have someone that I'm dating involved, it's like learning to let them be involved and then deciding like what are the limits to their involvement and that type of a thing.
Yeah. That's the thing you've been able to navigate. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
With my fiance, he actually this year was his third year going to Touch by Type 1 with me at the conference. And he knew nothing of Type 1. And then once we started dating, he's like, okay, so at my place, I need to stock Diet Dr. Pepper, Honey Sticks, Skittles, and Airheads. Because those are what I use to treat lows. And then the Diet Dr. Pepper is what I drink while my body is screaming at me to continue inhaling the kitchen. Instead, I give it Diet Dr. Pepper.
You give it Diet Dr. Pepper to calm it down.
Yeah, shut up. I'm giving you something. You think it's sugar. It's not really.
I like that you're just like, that's good enough. I'll marry you. Finally, somebody figured it out.
So it's been really good. And like at the beginning, he's like, can you eat that? And I'd like look at him like, I can eat whatever I want. I just have to plan for it and I have to dose for it. As long as it's not poison, I'm good. And so like for the first year of dating, he'd catch himself. And then there'd be times we'd be out to eat. And I would ask because someone's like, not sure if they're giving me the Coke or the Coke Zero. And I'm like, yeah, no, I need you to be sure it's a Coke Zero. So I'm a diabetic. And, and then because I said something about being diabetic, when I go to order my food, the oh so helpful wait staff decides to tell me whether I should or shouldn't have something. And then, but it's been nice that my fiance's like, no, she can eat anything, So it's nice that I don't always have to be the one stepping in to advocate. So it's been really nice to have someone else who's quote unquote in that fight.
Right. I'm not going to waste the insulin or my carbs on regular Dr. Pepper. That's all.
No, it's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
Now there are some things that are worth it. That is not one that's worth it for me.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Well, Stephanie, I really appreciate you doing this. You are one of the few people that I've interviewed that I've met in person. So that was interesting for me. Normally, I can't even picture the person I'm talking to, but today I could. So this was kind of fun. Thank you.
It was good. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate this. Hold on 1 second for me. Okay.
Okay.
A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. A huge thanks to a longtime sponsor, Eversense 365. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, and you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. I want to thank you so much for listening and remind you, please subscribe and follow to the podcast wherever you're listening right now. If it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio app, go hit follow or subscribe, whichever your app allows for, and set up those downloads so you never miss an episode, especially in Apple Podcasts. Go into your settings and choose download all new episodes. Hey, what's up, everybody? If you've noticed that the podcast sounds better and you're thinking like, how does that happen? What you're hearing is Rob at Wrong Way Recording doing his magic to these files. So if you want him to do his magic to you, wrongwayrecording.com. You got a podcast? You want somebody to edit it? You want Rob.